In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at some of the nicest metal miniatures I've seen for a long time and asking the question, are metal miniatures going extinct? Let's find out. I'm Benji and welcome to Benji's Hobbies. Now, I've been looking to expand my horizons somewhat and try out a few alternative games to the usual suspects. I want to try something fast-paced and intuitive with some incredible models set in an interesting and intriguing world. There has been one game in particular that has really caught my eye, and this is the Drowned Earth. There's just something about a skirmish game where you can perform some fast-paced, hardcore parkour style moves with a small handful of models in a post-apocalyptic world with some super cool models that really just ticks all of my boxes. Oh, and did I mention it has dinosaurs in it? What more could you want from a miniatures game? I was really excited when James at Olmec Miniatures, who make Drowned Earth, got in touch and asked if they could send me some minis to paint up and a rulebook to help me get to grips with the game. Now, one of the things that kind of caught me off guard with this delivery of miniatures was that they were all made in metal. Now, this isn't really a problem for me, and I actually quite like metal minis. When I started in the hobby back in the early noughties, a huge chunk of the Games Workshop range was made out of metal, and it was only the core troops, presumably those sold in greater volumes, that were made out of injection molded plastic. Now, as I said, I quite like metal miniatures. Maybe it's just the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia, but I love the feel of a nice, heavy metal miniature. Now, they certainly do have some downsides, as do all materials, but overall I feel like it's a fairly forgiving material to play with. Provided the minis are well cast, as these ones are, they tend to go together pretty well with superglue and a little activator, and any bent pieces are easily reshaped and straightened out. Unlike with some resin, which despite bending it back into shape, never quite stays where you want it to. But it really struck me that these days it's a rarity to see newer miniatures made in metal. In fact, while scrolling through Facebook groups, I do occasionally see people asking how to paint or prepare metal miniatures, because they're so alien to newcomers to the hobby. And this is when it hit me. Are metal miniatures going extinct? And what has caused this trend over the last decade or so? Now, Games Workshop are undoubtedly the biggest miniature manufacturer in the world, and to anyone who has followed them for a while, it's clear it's been their aim for the last 10 years to move away as much as possible from metal miniatures. In fact, the vast majority of their metal range was moved over to resin several years ago, much to the dismay of many hobbyists across the world. The few remaining metal models are pretty much all in the Middle-earth strategy battle game range, and over the last few years we've actually seen some models previously made in resin return in metal. Whilst I personally see this as a positive, I don't think any other ranges will receive the same treatment. The last new miniature that Games Workshop made officially out of resin, outside of Forge World that is, was the Inquisitor Eisenhorn model from back in 2018, and since then every new release has been in plastic. Whilst the biggest player in the market seems to be firmly planting its feet in plastic, a lot of the smaller manufacturers are still manufacturing in both resin and metal. However, the number of metal minis is definitely dwindling. Just looking around my local gaming store now, I definitely see fewer metal minis on the shelves than ever before. So, why this shift away from metal? Well, there are multiple reasons which could explain this shift. The weight alone can make it more difficult to stick pieces of larger models together without pinning, and the models tend to be a little more prone to chipping if not thoroughly protected with varnish. It's also a really tough material to convert with. Whilst plastic and resin are easy to cut with just a sharp knife in most cases, metal really isn't as easy, and might require some more heavy-duty tools. Most consumers want minis that are easy to work with, so plastic and resin makes more sense for most manufacturers. And whilst we're on the topic of plastic, the technology being used to create plastic miniatures has significantly improved over the last decade, and we're seeing huge improvements in the design and quality. However, due to the extensive investment required for plastic molds, they really need to be manufactured in huge quantities to make them commercially viable. For companies like Games Workshop, this isn't a problem. However, it really isn't viable for smaller, independent manufacturers, such as Olmec Miniatures, who make the Drowned Earth, who simply don't sell the volumes to justify tooling for manufacturing in plastic. Resin and metal have a much lower setup cost. So, for smaller, independent manufacturers producing smaller quantities or limited runs of miniatures, they offer a far more feasible solution. The final reason for the shift away from metal, though, is the price of the material. Metal prices, just as all other commodities, tend to shift depending on supply and demand. Tin, which makes up the biggest percentage of pewter miniatures, is currently experiencing a global all-time high price, mostly due to lockdown restrictions in Malaysian and Indonesian mines, which in 2020 produced about 30% of the global supply of tin. At the time of writing this script, the price is around 120% higher than it was just at the beginning of 2021, and over 750% higher than it was at the end of 2003, when metal minis were probably at their peak. This is way above inflation levels, and with prices like this, you'd think that metal minis would be long gone. Well, it's not quite that simple. Whilst the material makes up a percentage of the cost of the mini, the manufacturing efficiency also has an impact on the final costing. If a spin cast metal mold can make 50 of a model in the same time as it takes to cast 10 in resin, then despite the cost difference in material, it's still probably cheaper to make them in metal due to the added efficiency. Either way, that was a huge digression away from these stunning miniatures, and I had an absolute blast painting these guys. Whilst I didn't get my entire Bondsman Drowned Earth crew painted, I did paint enough to go and get a quick game in with Josh from the Pickle Jar and put the rules through their paces. Josh built an absolutely stunning post-apocalyptic board to play the Drowned Earth on, and it was awesome to go over and attempt to learn the rules together on such an immersive board. We had great fun, however, I think it'll take a couple more games for us to become fully intimate with the rules. Make sure you go and check out how he built this amazing board over on his channel. So finally, are metal minis going extinct? Well, for now, it doesn't seem like metal is going anywhere, especially for smaller manufacturers like Olmec Miniatures, who are still turning out some absolutely brilliant miniatures and a solid rule set to accompany them. Whilst tin prices are set to normalise again in the future, there is the potential for further volatility in the raw materials price, and along with increased energy prices, who knows what the future holds for metal minis. After talking to James, the manufacturer of the Drowned Earth, it seems that other materials such as resins are also becoming more viable, so perhaps we'll see an increased shift that way as technology becomes more commonplace. Either way, I don't think my love of metal minis is going anywhere anytime soon, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments how you feel about metal minis. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Let me know. If you want to get hold of some of these fantastic miniatures for yourself, then please go and check them out. I've included links down below where you can get hold of them, and whilst you're down there, why not check out my Patreon program as well. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.